Hi everyone. Welcome back to Julia's story. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. By midnight, the diner sounds like a pocket watch. The neon sign hums in a tired key. The coffee machine sighs between pours. My feet feel like I borrowed them from someone braver and forgot the receipt. Grease lives in the corners of the floor, no matter how many times the mop tells it to leave. The window holds the harbor in a long rectangle of black, with little stitches of light where boats sleep and pretend they are not missing the daylight. I move through the room with a tray and a smile I have taught to sit kindly on my face. The night regulars know me by the way I refill without asking. The fisherman with cracked knuckles and a laugh like gravel. The nurse who eats pancakes at 1 in the morning and calls me honey in a way that fixes a corner of my chest. The dishwasher, Mateo, slips a folded paper crane into the sugar caddy when he thinks I am not looking. People's small kindnesses keep the ceiling where it belongs. The bell above the door rings in a soft, polite way, and the ocean breathes out another little salt memory. He walks in the way a person does when he knows every table is a choice and chooses the one that makes him hard to photograph. Corner booth. Back to the wall. Eyes open but not hungry. He removes his coat like he is setting down a story with a handle. He has been coming for 2 months, always on Wednesdays and sometimes on nights when the fog eats the bridge and the buses run like they are guessing. He never makes the room bend around him, but it does anyway. The cloth of his coat is quiet. His hands are clean in a way that says someone else does his worst chores. There is a light scar across his knuckle like a pale thread, and a silver ring sits on his right hand, plain except for a shallow nick on the edge, the kind that tells you metal has a memory. I bring water and a smile that belongs to everybody and nobody. Coffee, I say, gentle. Pie is good tonight. Peach and vanilla. He almost smiles. It looks like a habit he put in a drawer and is trying on again. Coffee, he says. No sugar. Pie later if I earn it. I leave with the order and with a piece of his voice tucked behind my ear. It is low, warm in the middle, a little tired at the edges. It settles somewhere under my ribs and does not ask my permission. I hate that, a little. I love that, a little, too. The cook slides a mug across the pass and winks. For your phantom, he says. The one who tips like his wallet does not feel it. I snort, because laughter is a way to keep from thinking too much. If money could make up for being alone, this room would be heaven, I say, and the cook nods with the kind of agreement that has lived in kitchens for decades. I carry the coffee to the booth and set it down with a careful hand. Steam lifts and kisses my face. I catch the smell of dark roast and the faint, honest bitterness that makes the night tell the truth. He wraps his fingers around the mug like it is a small fire he plans to tend. You work too late, he says, eyes on the window instead of my name tag. It does not feel like a judgment. It feels like a report. I work the hours that pay the rent, I answer. The diner and I have a deal. I do not tell him about the small second-hand apartment above the laundromat, the window that sticks in winter, the plant on the sill that looks surprised it is still alive. I do not tell him about the cardboard box under my bed with my mother's things, a thin stack of papers I have not looked at in a year because the last time I did, the room tilted. I do not tell him about the way the city sometimes feels like a hand on my back and sometimes like a wall. He nods as if he already knows pieces I have not given him. This room fits you, he says, and then, as if catching himself, adds, I mean you make it feel like it was always supposed to be this warm. My face heats the way it does when someone says a true thing I am not ready to hold. Pie, I say. I'll see if you earned it. He almost smiles again, and it is almost enough to make the booth look less like a fortress. 2 teens in the far corner argue about a song and a girl, and whether feelings are a sport you can win if you practice. The nurse laughs at her phone and shakes her head like the world is silly and she forgives it. The mounted TV above the counter mumbles a late news cycle to no one in particular. A scrolling headline flashes the kind of crisp, heavy font that tries to tell you what matters. I hear a last name that belongs to money in this town. The kitchen fan drowns the rest. I pick up a stack of checks and a pen and let my mind rest in the small work. Table 4 needs more napkins. Booth 2 wants extra syrup. I draw a lighthouse in the corner of a clean ticket because I have drawn lighthouses since my mother taught me that light does not chase boats, it just keeps shining in one place and lets you decide if you want to come home. When I return with the pie, his phone is dark on the table, face down like a man who does not need to be reached unless a door is on fire. He has unfolded a napkin into a neat square. He watches the harbor like it is a book he has read 100 times and still hopes will end differently. I place the plate and the fork and the tiny diner knife that never meets a real battle. "Do you ever sleep?" he asks, soft. "Sometimes at the wrong time," I say. "Sometimes in little boats between islands of noise." He nods like a person who knows what boats are for. He cuts the pie and the crust crackles just right. He takes one bite and closes his eyes for a second like he is visiting a small kindness. When he opens them, he looks at my hands. "Those are working hands," he says. "The kind that keep a place honest." I want to make a joke to bounce the moment away. I do not. I let the sentence sit. I pour his water. I wipe a clean spot that does not need wiping. I stand in the comfort of the small space between us and the fact that there is no pressure for it to become something else. His leather card holder slips from his coat pocket when he reaches for the sugar he did not ask for. It lands with a quiet thud, barely a sound, more a vibration through the table. I bend without thinking. The habit of 1,000 nights. I pick it up with my left hand so my right can steady the coffee before anything spills. The leather is the kind that remembers your name if you tell it once. The corner is stamped with a tiny crest I have seen before. For a breath, the room narrows. The TV murmurs a last name into the air again, and it lands beside the crest like a puzzle piece being polite about fitting. On the leather, in gold letters so small and reasonable they could be a whisper, is a surname my city has learned to say when talking about buildings and grants and deals that happen in rooms I will never clean. Under the gold letters, there is a tiny scratch, not new, a line like a little lightning, and my stomach goes cold, not because of money, but because I have seen a scratch like that before, in a photo that lives in the bottom of a box under my bed. A summer picture from before I was born. A man with eyes like a night road, a ring with a nick, a leather card holder with a scar that looked like a tiny strike of weather. My mother had traced it with her thumb once when she thought I was asleep. He thanks me for picking it up, and I set it on the table with hands that know how not to shake in front of customers. The ocean reaches for the pier and does not reach far enough. The neon sign hums. My chest forgets how to be a room and turns into a hallway. "Everything okay?" he asks, careful. Not too curious. Not indifferent. Like he has seen people freeze before and learned it is better to ask in a way that gives them an exit. I try to say yes, that little sweet lie, and fail. The word does not make it to my mouth. I look at his knuckle with the pale thread of a scar. I look at the nick on the ring and the gold letters on the leather and hear the old news in my head like a radio under a pillow. I hear my mother humming the name she never said out loud. My hands remember to be steady. My voice does not. It goes small the way a flame goes small when wind decides to have an opinion. And I freeze. The freeze lasts a breath, maybe two. Steam climbs from his cup and fogs the small air between us, then slips away like it doesn't want to be blamed for anything. I set the leather back where it was and make my mouth remember how to work. Refill, I manage, a word so ordinary it could be a bridge. He inclines his head. Not prying. Not pretending he didn't see something change. Just giving me a step to land on. At the counter, I pour coffee like it's a metronome. Mateo passes a clean towel into my hand without looking at my face, the kind of kindness people learn from kitchens. The nurse taps the rim of her mug and mouths, "You okay?" and I nod because the word is quicker than the tangle of what is true. When I go back to the booth, I notice what I always notice and what I never named out loud. The way he folds the napkin into thirds, then into a square that sits perfectly even with the plate. The way his thumb rubs the rim of the cup once before he drinks, like he is checking for a crack no one else can see. The pale thread of a scar across his knuckle, a line that looks like weather on skin. The ring with the small nick shining a little duller than the rest of the silver, like a memory polished thin. He watches the window more than the room. Harbor black. Buoys blinking like patient eyes. A foghorn speaks from far off, a low sound that knows how to be both lonely and useful. I top off his coffee and catch the faintest scent that lives in the cloth of his coat. Clean, yes, but something older under it, cedar and smoke, like he once learned to build a fire and never forgot. "You're sure you're all right," he says, voice pitched for a person, not a crowd. "I had a long day before I had a long night," I say. The world felt heavy and then remembered it knows how to float. He smiles at that, small, like the idea belongs to him too. He reaches for the water and the cuff of his shirt shifts. On the underside of his wrist there's another scar, thinner, newer, the kind that comes from a doctor's careful work. It catches the neon light and then disappears when the sleeve slips back. For a second I want to name every mark on him and tell them what they mean to me. Instead I adjust the sugar caddy and straighten the salt like order could be a spell. Across the room the fisherman tells a joke about a gull with bad manners and the cook laughs like it is the first he has heard in weeks. The TV murmurs a headline I do not follow on purpose. Somewhere a bus sighs and kneels, and the door breathes open for people who know exactly what they can carry. I hand a to-go cup to a cabbie I have known since my first winter, the one who keeps a bowl of mints on his dash for anxious riders. He slips a candy into my palm with a wink. Mint wakes the mouth. It wakes my memory too. My mother's purse always smelled like mint and paper and a touch of perfume she called her church bottle. She used to hum when she was worried. Songs without words. The hum sits under my ribs now, and I do not tell it to stop. Back at the booth, the pie is half gone, and the plate looks like a small map of a country invented by butter. He has placed 2 bills under the check, the exact amount plus a tip so generous it makes the math blush. Under the money he has set a folded note for the dishwasher fund. Mateo pretends not to see it while seeing it completely. The good things people do in the dark teach a room how to breathe. "Storm coming in after 3, he says, eyes on the window, as if his bones know weather. "You should head out right after close." "You making sure I don't get stuck," I say lightly. "Making sure you don't have to be brave alone," he answers, and it lands between us without trying to be more than it is. He pays in cash. He never leaves paper that can be read by someone who isn't kind. He tucks his card holder away with a movement that repeats something I have seen before, and it looks like muscle memory. The gold letters flash once. The nick finds the light like a dog that knows where the kitchen is. The bell rings as a couple wanders in for pie and late advice about love. I seat them and pour decaf and listen to their story like it is new because to them it is. When I turn back, he is sliding from the booth. He puts on his coat without checking his reflection, and that tells me more than a mirror would. "Thank you for the warm," he says. And the silence. Both are rarer than people admit. "Thank you for paying the dishwasher," I say before I can stop myself. My voice curls around the truth. He blinks, a quick light in his eyes. "Some work is invisible until it isn't," he says. "I like my plates clean." He leaves with the soft sound the good door makes when it forgives you for using it. I watch him cross the glass to the night. He chooses the side street instead of the main one, the way a person does who has learned to live where cameras are not. When the door shuts, I let the room return to ordinary. I wipe salt that was already wiped. I refill a ketchup bottle just to feel the weight change in my hand. Mateo stacks plates with a rhythm that makes my shoulders drop. The nurse stands and slips cash under her cup and presses my fingers once like a small benediction. After last call, I lean on the counter and listen to the ocean push and pull. The neon hums. The clock over the pass ticks like it believes in morning. I take the tip pile to the safe and the coins spill and ring against each other, little metal truths. In the back room, I pull my locker open and sit on the crate that says sugar. The box with my mother's things waits in the dark of the bottom shelf where I left it months ago. I do not open it. Not yet. I touch the lid with the pressure of a person who is not ready to make the night rearrange itself. On my walk home, the air tastes like wet pennies and the first edge of the storm. The harbor wind pushes the scent of kelp and diesel up the street like a story that refuses to be kept by water. I pass the newspaper stand where the last editions doze in plastic. His last name sits on a headline like it belongs to the font. I keep my eyes forward because I want choice, not collision. Upstairs, the window sticks the way it does when the weather has opinions. I set water to boil and watch it think. The plant on the sill looks exactly like it did yesterday, surprised and stubborn. I unknot my apron and hang it like a promise that I will do this again tomorrow. My hands smell like coffee and lemons and the kind of steel that lives inside spoons. I lie down and the ceiling creaks like an old ship in a patient sea. Somewhere under my bed, a box waits with a photo and a letter and a summer I did not live. On my nightstand, a napkin sits folded in thirds, then a square, as if my hands wanted to practice a language I have not admitted I speak. Sleep comes slow and kind. It brings the sound of his voice saying storm after 3 and the curve of the ring Nick catching light. It brings my mother's hum and a lighthouse I drew on a ticket that ended up in his pocket by accident when I cleared the table too fast. I do not know the shape of tomorrow yet. I only know that the booth will be there, the harbor will keep breathing, and something inside me has recognized a detail it cannot unsee. The storm arrives like a careful guest. First the smell of wet metal under the door. Then a low roll that finds the counter and makes the salt shakers tap their lids. Neon turns the rain into strings of light. I count plates the way I count breaths when the night tries to run ahead without me. The mounted TV above the coffee station is usually a moving lamp. Weather, traffic, a mayor in a hard hat. I keep the volume low so the room can hear itself. Tonight a red banner slides across the bottom, clean and loud against the diner's soft yellow. A face fills the screen. He is standing at a podium that does not belong to midnight, hair damp from a different rain, mouth set in that straight way a person's mouth gets when he is trying to leave a room without moving his feet. The closed caption names him with the kind of confidence money buys. Vail Foundation pledges waterfront revitalization. Vail. The word lands in my chest like a coin at the bottom of a glass. The anchor's voice is syrup over a stone. Philanthropist Evan Vail. There it is again. A surname my city says when it wants to mean legacy without saying old money out loud. The camera cuts to footage from last week. A handshake under a white tent. His sleeve shifts and the ring finds a thread of light, Nick and all. He laughs at a joke he did not need to laugh at, and it sounds like a thing you rehearse. He lifts a cup of water with the right hand, the pale thread of a scar across the knuckle catching and vanishing as if the television has learned how to breathe. I forget the towel in my hand until it cools, heavy with water it did not deserve. Mateo follows my eyes to the screen and whistles low, just air between teeth, no song. The nurse turns in her corner and smiles like she is happy to see a decent man who pays for playgrounds. The fisherman mutters something about piers that never needed saving until someone discovered how to sell them. The world always tells 2 stories at once. I turn the volume down another hair and the caption does the rest. Vail. Evan. The crest I saw pressed into leather. The ring Nick. The voice pitched like a key that fits the lock on people who were taught to listen. My mother's hum rises under my ribs, that shape she made with her mouth when she was trying to decide if saying a word would break the room. She never said that surname out loud to me, but she wrote it in a letter once and folded the paper like it was dangerous. The letter lives in a box under my bed with a photograph from a summer I did not live. In the photo, a man's card holder has a tiny lightning scar on the corner where the leather learned about gravity. I refill mugs with a hand that pretends it is just a hand. I wipe a circle no one will see. I take a breath that makes my apron rise and fall like a small sail. The diner returns to its rightful size. I do not. There is a strange feeling that happens when a detail stands up from a pile of other details and says my name. At 2, the night thins. The nurse leaves with a wave that feels like a blanket at the right temperature. The fisherman takes a piece of pie to go for a wife who has learned to eat kindness in the dark. The rain steadies into a sound that makes the roof feel old but trustworthy. I lock the cash in the safe and count the change with the soft clink that tells me the floor underneath understands balance. On the way home, the street is wet enough to put the city's face in the pavement. Buses hiss and kneel, patient beasts. I pass a newsstand where his surname grins from a stack even with plastic over it. I do not stop. I hold my jacket tight at the throat like the skin there needs reminding how to be mine. Upstairs I set the kettle on because that is how I ask the apartment to be kind. I slide the box from under the bed and the cardboard huffs dust into the lamplight. The lid holds the warmth of my hands the way a cat would if I had one. Inside there is a small history that fits in a shoebox even though it should probably have demanded a trunk. There is the photo I remember too well and not well enough. A woman who is not yet someone's mother, a summer dress, a harbor not this harbor but a cousin of it, and a man with a shadow at his jaw that looks like ease. He is holding a leather card holder and the corner is nicked like lightning wrote its initial there. The silver ring with the tiny bite out of it looks like it was always going to be a memory. My mother had circled the leather scar with her thumbnail the last time I asked about him, then laughed in that way you do when you are trying to distract your own mouth. She said he liked black coffee and boats he did not have time to sail. Beneath the photo lies the envelope I have touched and not opened more nights than I admit. My name on the front, her handwriting steady, the loop in the Y like a girl practicing. The flap is sealed with the kind of glue old office supplies believed in. I rest my thumb against it and do not push. Not yet. The kettle starts to think, then sings, and the steam makes the window glass remember it can fog. I pour, sit, let the cup warm my palm, and listen to the apartment breathe. Pipes clunk. The fridge hums a line it learned from a neighbor. Somewhere down the hall, a couple argues in the kind of low that means they will wake up still holding on. The box waits. The envelope waits. The night is a hand on my shoulder that refuses to answer in advance. On the table, I lay out a napkin and fold it into thirds, then a square. My fingers do it without asking me. I place the photo beside it. The ring nick is small and sure. My name on the envelope looks like it trusted the future. On the counter, the lighthouse I drew in the corner of a ticket last night has ended up under a magnet. I do not remember putting it there. The beam reaches across the paper like it meant to find the door. There is a sound from the street that pulls me to the window. The storm has moved on to punish another neighborhood. Clouds part just enough to show a strip of the kind of sky that remembers how not to be heavy. A car slows, stops, idles. For a second, the headlights catch the diner sign across the way, the one that hums when it is tired and still tries. The car pulls off. The street returns to its dark. My phone lights on the table, a rectangle of possible. A message from a number I do not have saved. You did not take anything. Those 5 words and a small dot blinking like a breath that is trying to steady itself. I stare until the dot disappears. No name. No proof. Not from my boss. Not from anyone I know. A stranger's apology fits the shape of a promise and I refuse to let it own me. I turn the phone face down. The envelope waits like a tide that has learned patience. I wash the cup because washing a cup is something that always makes sense. I set it upside down and watch water bead and slip and find the sink. I return to the table and rest my palm on paper that once touched my mother's mouth when she sealed it. My fingers feel the press of the flap and the tiny grit of glue that time did not finish. The city hum lowers and the plant on the sill leans toward the nothing that will be sun in a few hours. In the diner tomorrow, he will probably sit in the same booth and fold the napkin into a square and say something kind about storms. The news will say his surname with the smooth pride of a city that likes a ribbon cutting. Somewhere a gull will steal a French fry from a child, and the child will laugh like the world is simple. I do not know what will happen inside the centimeter that is a person saying a name to another person who has not heard it from the right mouth yet. I slide my nail under the flap. I pause, breath held, throat tight like I am leaning over deep water. Then I let the paper rest and pull my hand back because sometimes not yet is the bravest thing. I tuck the envelope back under the photo, slide both into the box, and move the box only as far as the drawer by the bed. Not hidden. Not displayed. Close. On the nightstand, I set the folded napkin square and the lighthouse ticket side by side. The beam faces the page edge like it has decided which way to shine. I lie down and close my eyes. Sleep stands at the doorway, undecided, then steps in. I know the word that belongs to him now. I let it sit on my tongue without releasing it into the room. Veil. Soft at the start, blade at the end. I keep it there in the dark as if saying it out loud without the right listener would send it somewhere I could not fetch it back from. The night holds. The cup dries. The envelope waits for the hour it will choose me. Morning makes the diner smell like oranges and bleach. I mop the floor in slow figure eights and listen to the fan argue with the ceiling. The harbor outside exhales a thin fog, soft enough to forgive last night. In my apron pocket, the small edge of an old envelope presses my hip like a question that has learned patience. I told myself I would wait. The envelope tells me it has waited enough. After the breakfast rush, I take my break in the back room where the light is always a little tired. The drawer sticks, then lets go with a sigh. I set the envelope on the table and rest my palm on it the way you calm a nervous animal. My name sits on the front in my mother's neat hand, the curl in the Y like she believed girls should have one soft flourish in a hard world. The flap opens with a salt sound, paper unsealing from time. Inside, a letter folded once, then again. A second shape slips free and lands in my lap. A napkin. Linen, not diner cotton. Pressed. The corner carries a tiny crest I have seen in gold on leather. Someone has drawn a lighthouse in ballpoint blue across the blank, the beam reaching a little too far like it was eager. The line work is clumsy and earnest. My throat tightens. I hold the napkin in the light and smell cedar and old starch, the faint ghost of a room that was not mine. I unfold the letter. My mother's voice comes up through the paper, warm and steady like she is talking over the sink. Love, it begins, no dear, no date, just the word she used when she was too tired for ceremony. I kept this until I thought you would know what to do with it. Not to keep a secret from you. To make sure the secret did not choose our life for us. Her sentences walk the way she did, with purpose and a pause before stares. I met him a summer I had a job taking notes at the pier. He came with the money people, the ones who keep their coats on even when the sun is behaving. He was not loud. He laughed when he meant it and folded napkins like maps, thirds then square, always the same. He liked his coffee black. He could tell a storm before anyone else heard it. He had a scar on his knuckle from a broken bottle at a party he did not want to be at. He wore a plain silver ring with a little bite in the edge and said boats teach you where metal gives. I have to stop and breathe. The fan ticks once over my head. Out front, the bell rings and rings again and quiets. Mateo's voice floats in and goes away. The letter holds my hands like it has more to do. We were foolish and careful at the same time, she writes. We walked by the harbor and told the water the things we could not put in other people's rooms. He used to touch the rim of his cup like he was checking for a crack. He liked to draw lighthouses that leaned too much. He said that meant he trusted the wind. He said the city would ask him to choose a life that was not small, and maybe he would say yes, and maybe he would regret it. The napkin trembles against my fingers, and I lay it flat again. The lighthouse beam looks like a reach I recognize. I did not ask him for a promise, she says. He did not offer one. When I found out I was carrying you, I stood by the water and chose you out loud. I did not go to him. He had already stepped into a current I did not want to drown in. I decided you would have a life that did not wait for someone else's calendar to be kind. I do not notice the first tear until it hits the table and leaves a dark coin on the wood. I wipe it with the cuff of my sleeve and keep going. If you ever meet him, she writes, ink a little heavier here, do not ask for old debts. Ask for the smallest true thing he can offer. Watch his hands. If he is the same man, he will protect the quiet more than the room. If he has changed, you will know. You always were good at knowing. If you need to make sure it is him, say the word lighthouse and watch where his eyes go. If he looks at a window before he looks at you, that is the man I knew. There is no signature. There is a line at the bottom in lighter ink, like she wrote it later, standing up. You are not a secret. You are my best truth. Love is sometimes a door you open for yourself. I place the letter on the napkin and trace the lighthouse beam with a fingertip. Out in the diner, a plate breaks and Rosa swears under her breath in a way that makes me smile. I fold the letter once, then again, the creases falling into the same places they learned years ago. I slide both back into the envelope and tuck it into the drawer, not hiding, just close. When I close the wood, the room does not tilt. My body does and then steadies, like a boat asking the wake to be reasonable. The rest of my shift I move through the small work with my mother's sentences in my pocket. Napkins to thirds, then square. Coffee black. Storm before 3. Watch his hands. The mounted TV tries to sell me weather and t-shirts. A kid near the window draws a crooked lighthouse with a red crayon and I have to look away so I do not crowd his small miracle with my own. At 2:45 the rain starts thin and then remembers how to be rain. The harbor turns its face to it. The bell rings and lets in a little wind with a man who looks like a coat rack and a woman who wants only soup. I carry bowls and plates and there is a quiet in me that is not the same quiet as before. Near closing, the door opens on a gust and he is there, not a vision, not a headline, just a man who has stopped pretending the booth does not belong to him. Damp at the cuffs. Coat dark with weather. He nods to the room like it is a person he knows from a better hour. I bring coffee without asking and set it down and do not try to stop my hands from shaking once. Only once. He wraps his fingers around the mug. The scar across the knuckle glows pale as a truth that never learned to brag. He looks up at me and something in his face eases, not because he is comfortable, because he has decided to stop guarding the door. You drew a lighthouse on my ticket last night, he says, a line that could be nothing and is not. It ended up in my pocket. It felt like weather. I nod. Words stack in my mouth and choose their order very carefully. Lighthouse, I say, just the one, set down like cutlery on a table that needs it. His eyes flick to the window, fast, instinct more than choice, as if the beam has to be checked before the room can keep breathing. Then he looks back at me and does not pretend he did not. The smallest, truest thing has entered the room. We stand there a second too long for customers and not long enough for 20 years. The cook bangs the pass and the world breaks the moment into usable pieces. I refill his coffee and take orders and sweep sugar and let the clock climb. When the last plate is stacked and the last bill signed, I turn the sign to closed and flip one switch so the room remembers its softer voice. He has not left. He is not trying to be important. He is sitting with his hands open on the table like someone who is ready to be asked. I walk to the booth with my apron strings wrapped around my fist and the napkin fold from the drawer in my pocket like courage. After I lock up, I say, keeping my voice even, I'm going to the water. The bench by the lamppost with the chipped paint. It is where I go when I need the air to help me think. He nods once. No speech. No plea. Just yes, with his whole face. I will be there, he says. I will come empty-handed. I will listen first. Good, I say. The word lands like a plate finding its shelf. I clear a last cup. I wipe a last table. I let the neon hum fall into a low note that makes the room honest. In the back room, I take the envelope from the drawer and slip the lighthouse napkin into my pocket again, not for proof, for company. I tie my jacket tight and push the door with my shoulder. Outside, the harbor breathes a clean cold. The bench waits with rain freckles on the wood and a paint chip like a small white moon near the bolt. The lamppost hums a little. The water keeps its own counsel. I sit. I put my hands flat on the slat and feel the wood say, I can hold you. Footsteps come from the side street, even unhurried, the way a person walks when they have finally decided not to run from their own name. The night opens a little, just enough to let two people in. The bench is damp but honest. I wipe the slats with my sleeve and the cold goes through the fabric into my skin like truth finding its way. The lamppost hums a thin note. The harbor breathes salt and old rope. A buoy knocks the pier with the patience of someone who knows waiting is also a kind of work. He comes from the side street that smells like rain on stone. Coat dark. Hands open. He stops a step back from the pool of light, as if asking the air permission to enter the small country I made of this bench. Thank you for letting me come, he says. Sit, I answer. We keep it simple out here. He lowers himself to the far edge, leaves a space the size of a boundary between us. A gull shifts on a piling and tucks its head back down. Far off, a horn speaks and the sound folds into the night. This is not a scene, I say. No speeches. No charity. No exchange of anything that will make me feel smaller when the sun shows up. I want the smallest true thing you can say, and nothing you cannot carry after you say it. He nods. The wind lifts his hair and sets it down again. He looks at the water first, then at me, like the lighthouse test my mother wrote about was a muscle he never quit using. I was 20 and built for rooms I did not understand, he says quietly. I learned how to read hunger on faces and how to turn it into applause. I was better at folding napkins than at holding a good thing with both hands. I loved the harbor because it did not ask me for angles. I loved a woman who did not ask me for a future I kept promising to someone else. He stops. I do not help him over the next sentence. I let him work for it. I drew lighthouses that leaned, he goes on, almost smiling at the foolishness of it, because I thought trust was the same as luck. It is not. He rubs his thumb along the rim of the bench like he is checking for a crack. The pale thread of a scar across his knuckle finds the light and vanishes. The ring nick blinks once, a small star that remembers. I have a letter, I say, and my voice behaves. Her words. Not to climb back into a story, just to keep the floor level while we talk. I do not pull the envelope out. I do not need props. I have the napkin in my pocket, folded, the little blue lighthouse beam rushing too far the way a young hand does when it wants to be enough. He watches my face as if I am the thing that must not be rushed. She chose me without asking you to be anyone you could not be, I say. That is the beginning and the end of blame for tonight. I drew a lighthouse on your check because my hands knew before I did. His mouth lifts and falls. I kept one, he says, voice thinned by memory. A linen napkin from a room where linen had too much to prove. Bad drawing. Leaning Tower of Hope. It lived in a book until the book moved houses, and then it lived in my wallet until the leather learned it. The water knocks once, like the harbor is agreeing. Tell me one thing about her I would not know from photographs, I say. I keep my tone level so the question arrives kind. She counted boats when she could not sleep, he says without pausing. Not the masts. The wakes. She said water remembers. She said a person becomes the kind of shore they stand on. I pretended not to understand, and then I did. The bench takes the weight of that and does not complain. The lamppost hums a little louder and quiets. A car rolls through the far light and fades. I do not want your name on my bills, I say. I do not want to stand in a room while people practice being moved by a story you did not have to survive. I want to know if the person who folds napkins into squares can be trusted to sit in ugly moments and not fix them with money. He swallows. His voice stays low. I can sit, he says. I can carry what I broke, not with a check, with hours, with calendars, with showing up when the room is too small. Then here are my rules, I say, laying them down like cutlery at a table that has been waiting. No one gets told my life without my permission. Not a handler. Not a board. Not a friend who likes to gossip. If you ever see me at that booth with people I love, you will pass like weather and keep the room hours. If you reach out, you will do it in sentences that can fit on a screen and do not need a press team to explain. Yes, he answers. Yes to all of it. And, I add, softer because this part is a far door, if we keep talking, you will not introduce me to your world before you learn the names in mine. The dishwasher. The nurse. The fisherman who hates gulls. If we ever sit at the same table and someone thanks you for the meal, you will say my name louder than theirs. He lets out a breath that sounds like a held thing finally learning the shape of release. I can do that, he says. I should have learned how to do that first. We let quiet pour between us and do its job. The harbor counts small waves and does not keep score. The wind lifts salt to my mouth and it tastes like a childhood I almost remember. Do you want to ask me anything else? He says. Not a challenge. An invitation placed carefully in the air. Just one, I answer. When did the nick happen? He looks at the ring and the smile that finds his mouth is not practiced. A bottle at a party I wanted to leave, he says. I put my hand somewhere it did not belong to keep it from breaking a good thing. It bit the edge and I refused to smooth it out. I liked the reminder that metal gives. That I give. I nod. I do not say that my mother had written that exact sentence in ink that tried not to shake. I do not say that the box under my bed feels less like a door and more like a window. Storms make the diner smell like pennies, I say, because I need one harmless sentence to land on. Storms make boardrooms smell like fear, he says, and the little truth makes both of us laugh, quick and soft, like we just told a secret to the right person. He reaches into his coat and pulls out nothing. Empty hands. He places them on his knees and lets them stay there. I am not asking you for anything tonight, he says. Not a claim. Not a title. Only the chance to send a message on Sundays. 3 lines. What I noticed. What I learned. Where I showed up. You can mute me without explaining. You can block me if I ever forget how to be small. 3 lines. I repeat. Sundays. Simple words. The light on the water shifts and a piece of polish in the dark becomes a broken bottle of sky. I breathe and the air drops deeper into me, past old fear and into a place I keep for things that might become true. I stand. He stands because some habits are good ones. I hold out my hand, palm warm from bench wood. He does not grip like a man closing a deal. He holds like a person being allowed to keep a promise he is just now learning how to make. Good night, I say. Take the side street. Cameras like the main one too much. He almost smiles. I know where the shadows are, he says, and his voice does not make it sound noble. Just a fact he is tired of. He takes 2 steps back into the darker part of the path. Before the light lets go of his face, he looks toward the water the way a person looks at a friend who has kept them alive without ever asking for thanks. I sit again after he is gone. The bench gives me back the heat he left behind in a thin line. I put my hands on the wood. I say my mother's name in my head like a prayer and a promise. The lighthouse I carry does not move. It does not chase. It holds still. It keeps shining. Closing time softens a diner. The neon hum turns friendly. Chairs scrape low and patient as we flip them onto tables. I leave the corner booth on the floor, lights dimmed just enough to make the chrome look like dusk. The harbor throws its black shoulder against the window. Somewhere a gull cries like it forgot the hour. He arrives without ceremony. Coat damp at the sleeves. No entourage. No watchful eyes. He touches the bell with 2 fingers as if it might be tired too. Mateo waves once from the dish pit and disappears, clatter going quiet like respect knows when to practice. Thank you for the light, he says. He means the lamps, and not only the lamps. Coffee, I answer. Black. It is not a question. Steam curls between us when I set the cup down. He holds it the way people hold warm things when they are trying to say something harder than usual. I take the bench side opposite him, apron still on, strings wrapped twice around my wrist like I am keeping my pulse where I can find it. No speeches, I remind him. Small truths. The kind a person can carry home. He nods and looks once at the window before he looks at me. A lighthouse test passed without applause. I met your mother when everything in me believed scale was the same as meaning, he says, voice low enough to make the sugar caddy lean in. She had the opposite gift. She could make a small hour feel like a whole life done right. We walked the pier because it was the one place in the city that did not ask me to perform. She counted wakes. I folded napkins like a man trying to control what never wanted to be controlled. He breathes, steady, and does not reach for the part that might make him look good. I did not know about you, he says. Not then. She chose that. I do not blame her. She was braver than I was. The day I learned her address had changed. The summer moved on without telling me where it put her. I went where the family sent me next. London. Rooms with thin air. I told myself I would come back when the ground under me stopped tilting. I kept not coming back. By the time I did, the pier felt like a story I had read and misremembered. The coffee cools between us. The neon hums and falls quiet. I keep my hands flat on the formica so the past does not pull them where it wants. You were a headline before you were a person to most of this city, I say. Money does that to a name. I work in a place that asks for exact change and make it feel like a gift. Both rooms tell the truth. I will not let one swallow the other. He nods. I am not here to buy what I broke, he says. Not with cash or the kind of apology that clears my conscience and leaves you carrying it. I am here to tell you I will be small where you need me small and steady where you ask me steady. That is the best version of me I know how to bring. The clock over the past ticks like it wants to be believed. I take the napkin from my pocket and unfold it once. Linen. The tiny crest in the corner. A lighthouse drawn in blue. Beam reaching too far the way a young hand does when it hopes reach is the same as love. I lay it on the table between us. I found this with her letter, I say. She kept it because she knew herself. She did not keep it because she needed a myth. He looks at it for a long moment like people look at old photographs of themselves they barely recognize. When his mouth moves, it is not a smile. It is memory opening a door it never thought it would have to open again. I drew a dozen of those, he says. None of them stood up straight. People do not always either, I say. He laughs once, without defense. No, he says. They do not. I do not tell him about the part of the letter that said say lighthouse and watch his eyes. Some tests are not for retaking. There is something else, he says carefully, and now the words cost him. I am under a kind of glass that makes every movement into a statement. I keep my life small when I can. The foundation is a beast that eats attention. I am trying to feed it with my own hours instead of other people's days. I cannot promise you cameras will not try to make a story where there is none. I can promise to stand between you and that whenever the choice is mine. My life will not become a photograph, I answer. If anyone points a lens at my table to sell an idea, you will stand in front of it or you will step away from my door. Those are the only two positions you get. Yes, he says. He does not ask for exceptions. And inside this room, I go on, we follow ordinary rules. You wait your turn. You tip like plates matter. If I am busy, you are not. If I am off, you pretend you forgot the address. Yes, he says again, and the word is not weak. It is a shape a person can lean on. Words are cheap, I add. So here is the structure. I count with my fingers against the table so the plan can hear itself. Sundays. 3 lines by text. What you noticed. What you learned. Where you showed up. No paragraphs. No perfume. If you miss a week, you tell me before you miss it. If you send more than that without cause, I will mute you for a month and you will not complain. He exhales like a held breath just found a chair. Yes, he says softly. 3 lines. No perfume. And, I add softer still, because this part is a door I am opening while I still have shoes on, we do not name anything you have not earned. Do not try to turn biology into belonging with a sentence. If the day comes when we decide to test the name neither of us has said out loud yet, it will be because I asked for it. Not because guilt got heavy. His eyes shine the way people's eyes shine when they are holding the urge to reach for a word that would feel good and do harm. I will wait for your yes, he says. I will not place a claim where a gift belongs. We let quiet do some of the work. The harbor outside knocks its old rhythm against the pilings. The dish machine finishes a cycle and sighs like a tired animal. I straighten the napkin into a square, thirds, then fold, and he smiles without looking down, like his hands remember the habit inside mine. There is one question I need to put on the table, he says, not looking at his phone though it buzzes once where he left it face down. Do you have enough? Not wealth. Enough. Rent steady. Heat sure. An extra in the drawer for when tires misbehave. The old answer rises first, proud and lonely. I swallow it and let the true one take its place. Enough most weeks, I say. A wobble sometimes. I do not want a check. I want a name I can call if a pipe bursts during a storm and the landlord forgets he knows my number. He nods like a man being taught. You can put me in your phone under a word that will not make the room tilt when my name lights your screen, he says. No pressure. Just a voice who knows where the valve is. I tuck that sentence into the place where useful tools go. Not a promise I have to cash. A wrench I might borrow. Somewhere outside, thunder murmurs like a friend who does not want to be dramatic. The neon flickers and steadies. I pour the last inch of coffee into his cup. He does not drink. He looks at me the way a person looks at a map they wish they had owned earlier. You have your mother's way of making a room decide to be kinder, he says. You have your own way of telling it the rules. We both keep lighthouses, I answer. We just hold them differently. His phone buzzes again. He does not reach. I do not ask. Some fires you let other people name. He slides the cup away and stands, careful not to crowd the air. Sunday, he says. Sunday, I say. He takes a step, then stops and turns just enough to let a smaller truth cross the space. When I first came in, he says, I thought the diner felt like the summer pier grew walls. That is why I kept choosing the booth. It was not about hiding. It was about coming home without making the ocean do all the work. He leaves the words there. He leaves the napkin because it is not his anymore, and also because it is. When the door shuts, the room swells a little, like breath returning to a chest. I sit with my hands on the table and feel the metal under the laminate, solid as a promise that knows it is not enough and tries anyway. The storm tests the glass, and the glass remembers its job. My phone lights where I left it by the register. A new number. 3 simple lines. Saw a boy give his umbrella to a nurse at the curb. Learned it takes less courage to speak when you have practiced the small ones. Showed up to the board meeting and said no to a photo that would have stolen a story that did not belong to us. I do not answer. Not yet. I fold the napkin into thirds, then a square, and slip it back in my pocket like a compass you do not show off because you still need it to work. The night holds. The harbor breathes. A gull cries like it just remembered the tide. Somewhere down my street, a pipe decides it has opinions and a landlord lets the phone ring once, then twice. I turn off the sign and lock the door and listen as the storm chooses a direction. Sundays come with small weather. A thin light in my kitchen. The kettle doing its old song. His message arrives like church bells you decide for yourself whether to hear. Saw an old man drop his wallet. A kid ran it back without counting. Learned that saying no to a meeting gives space to say yes to a person. Showed up to paint a fence at the shelter with the board member who thinks paint is a metaphor and made him hold the ladder anyway. I read and put the phone face down and breathe. The words do not fix anything. They do not even try. They sit in the room like clean tools. I can pick them up or leave them where they are. At the diner, the week keeps its rhythm. The nurse orders pancakes and puts a heart in the syrup with the back of her spoon. The fisherman tells me the gulls have started manners school and flunks them all. Mateo hides little cranes in sill corners. The cook taps the order wheel and calls my name like he is checking I did not forget I have one. He comes in on the quiet nights, the way a tide knows which rocks to forgive. Some evenings we do not speak more than 10 words. He folds the napkin. I refill the coffee. The window keeps our secrets in a long rectangle of black. He tips like the plates matter. When the booth has too much gravity, he leaves a line on the check. Thank you for steady. No signature. No claim. There are things he cannot return, and we do not pretend otherwise. He cannot give me back a mother's last months or the rent paid in worry. He cannot return a childhood without night shifts or a heart that learned to set a table for one without making a speech about it. He cannot rewind to the summer where the napkin was drawn and choose a smaller life that might have been ours. The past stays paid in the currency it cost. A woman from his world calls the diner phone one afternoon and asks for me by name. Her voice is polished like shoes that never touch city puddles. She says the foundation is considering a human interest piece about community work. She says my story could help readers feel connected to the pledge plans for the waterfront. I hear the words and picture a lens pointed at my table until it forgets I am not public property. No, I say. Kindly and clearly no. I hang up and my hands shake and then stop. I step outside to the alley where flour hangs like gentle dust. I text him one line. Do not send people to tell my story for me. The reply is fast. I did not. I will make sure no one else does. I am sorry you had to block a door I should have locked. He follows with his 3 Sunday lines that week sooner than Sunday, because rules are not cages. Saw a staffer hit delete on a photo request before I asked. Learned that guarding privacy is a practice, not a sentence. Showed up where the cameras were not and let the day be small on purpose. On a rain morning, a reporter sits at the counter and tries to be a person. She orders coffee and leaves a card beside the creamer. I slide it back with a smile that has muscles. We pour black coffee and we serve eggs, I say. We do not auction people. She nods like she has a mother who would be proud of her for coming and prouder still if she left. She tucks the card away. The cook refills her cup without judgment. The door rings and the room resumes its ordinary pulse. Other losses arrive quiet. Not dramatic. Real. He is late once and sends a line at the door. Stuck in a room that invents emergencies. I will not ask you to wait. I send back a thumbs up and wipe a clean spot until it squeaks. The harbor bangs the pier with storm ribs. I think about invisible work. About all the hours nobody clapped for when I kept a diner moving like a small, faithful heart. I keep my rules. He keeps his. When he finds a way to help, it is shaped like dignity. The back sink floods at close because the pipe has decided to be a poet. He steps into the alley, rolls up his sleeves, and finds the valve with his bare hands. He does not pose. He does not tell a story about it later. He leaves wet footprints and a towel folded on the mop bucket as if this is the kind of work he wants to remember when the room tries to sell him better ones. The things he cannot give back become the boundary where we meet. We do not crawl under it. We build a low gate and swing it open only when both of us are looking. I save my mother's letter in the drawer that sticks, not as leverage, as company. Sometimes I read the line where she wrote love is sometimes a door you open for yourself, and I do not ask who she meant it for. I claim it without permission. On a Tuesday, my landlord forgets his decency and remembers his calculator. He raises his voice through the door like volume can turn a question into rent. I tell him about the leak that has learned to count. I tell him about the heat that sometimes guesses. He shrugs like my comfort is a hobby. I stand with my back to the jam and say no to numbers that do not come with repairs. He calls me a brave word and leaves. My hands shake. I set a pot under the leak. I label the pot with a strip of tape that says not a decoration. I laugh because sometimes you have to. I do not text him. I do not need a rescue. I put on my shoes and go downstairs and ask Mrs. Ortiz for the name of the plumber who fixed her kitchen when the sink tried to become a fountain. She gives me a number and a mango. I call the number. I eat the mango over the sink. Juice runs down my wrist like proof that sweetness can still surprise you. He sends his 3 lines on Sunday with a softness that finds me where I am without asking me to move. Saw a woman at City Hall telling the clerk her story until the form understood her. Learned again that scale is not meaning. Showed up to sit through a budget fight and saved my voice so I could use it where it mattered. He does not say my landlord. He does not say do you need. He stays small and steady. I let the words sit on my counter and touch them like you touch a piece of sea glass you found alone on a beach. The diner tests us both one night. A man I have never seen sits by the window and watches the door more than his menu. He pays for a slice of pie with a bill that feels like a camera. He leaves without eating. Minutes later, I see the flash down the block, the ugly kind that takes without asking. I step outside and the air tastes like pennies and anger. He is crossing the street. He sees the glint and shifts. He walks between the lens and the diner sign and keeps moving. No hero shape. Just a body that understands a promise. The flash catches jacket, not face. The photographer curses the way people do when the wrong story got in the way of money. I go back inside and pour coffee for 2 teenagers who do not know yet that love is not a tournament. The room cools like a fever breaking. What he cannot return becomes, oddly, what steadies us. It keeps us from pretending there is a big gesture waiting at the end like a bow. There is not. There is a booth and a bench and a lighthouse that never moved to chase what it wanted. There is a practice of showing up. There are rules written plain as salt. The night before the storm they are predicting like a guest with too many demands. The diner smells like oranges and worry. The cook says we will close early if the bridge decides it is a boat. Mateo stacks plates like a hymn. He walks in, rain on his collar, a line on his face where day tried to write itself in. Sunday, he says, as if the day could arrive early if we ask gently. I nod. Sunday, I say. But if the weather forgets its manners before then, we use a word that means stop and breathe. He waits. Lighthouse, I tell him. If either of us says it, the other one listens. He presses his hand once to the formica, the way a person swears without needing a book. Lighthouse, he repeats, and the way he says it makes the room remember what it is for. Outside, the wind practices. The harbor puts its shoulder to the pier. Somewhere a pipe makes a decision. The neon hums and steadies. I look at the door and know it will test both of us. Not because of money. Because storms always have a second plan. The clock over the pass ticks toward it. Storms have a smell. Pennies and seaweed and the breath of old rope. The diner windows tremble like they remember other winters. Neon hums low, stubborn. We close early because the bridge is sulking and the power flickers like a tired eye. Mateo stacks plates fast, a rhythm that sounds like prayer. The cook salts the sidewalk, muttering, as if salt could talk a cloud into good behavior. On the walk home the street shines black as spilled ink. Rain needles my cheeks and finds the seam at my collar. Wind lifts wrappers and then changes its mind. I pass the laundromat and the glass is fogged with bodies leaning into chores. I turn the corner toward my building and the air shifts in my chest, a pressure you feel in your teeth. The stairwell window throws a thin light, the kind that means something is wrong. On the first landing Mrs. Ortiz stands in slippers, a bucket in one hand and worry in both eyes. Water threads from the ceiling like a bad idea, learning it can move. A hairline crack in the plaster spits and holds, as if the building is trying not to say what it needs. Pipe, she says. The word is more breath than voice. It woke up angry. We move because moving is what we know. Pots under the worst drip. Towels around the door like a levee made of cotton. I knock on 2B with my knuckles until knuckles are not enough. No answer. The leak grows a mouth. The landlord does not pick up. Rain punches the windows like a drummer who forgot softness. I grab my phone and the screen feels like a fish in my hand. My thumb writes one word without asking my pride for permission. Lighthouse. I do not add please. The word is both the ask and the rule. Water finds a seam above the electrical panel and hisses like a warning. Mrs. Ortiz sways and catches herself on my arm. She is all bird bones and mango kindness. My teeth click with the cold that decides to live inside clothes. Footsteps come from the street, quick but not careless. He takes the last 2 stairs in one breath, coat dark with the kind of rain that means business. No entourage. No umbrella he can pose with. A flashlight lives in his hand like it was born there. Tell me where, he says, not loud, scanning the ceiling, the walls, the stupid cheerful panel with its labels written by a landlord who loves permanent marker more than maintenance. Back hall, I answer. Shutoff lives behind the insult of a painted-over grate. He passes the light to me and I hold the beam steady. He kneels and finds the edge of metal with his nails. Paint cracks like old icing. He works without swearing at the building, which makes me like him more than I want to. The plate comes loose. Cold air breathes out of the wall. He reaches in and feels along pipes with both hands, calm as a person finding a switch in a dark room he loves. Here, he says. I hear the valve groan before I see his wrist twist. The leak grudges itself slower. Another turn. Slower still. The worst thread becomes a thin bare damp, a bad dream waking up. The lights choose that second to blink off. We stand in the stairwell inside a pocket of thunder. Flashlight beam draws a careful circle. Power goes sideways in storms. It always has. You good? He asks Mrs. Ortiz, and the way he says it unknots something in me. I am a broom with lungs, she says, fierce and shaking. But I am here. He nods as if something holy has just spoken. He takes the bucket from her before pride can argue and sets it under the last drip like a chess piece you wanted to save. From the street, the wrong kind of light flares. White. Greedy. It slides along the stairwell window and stops like a hand pressed to glass. A camera loves a mess it did not help mop. My skin prickles. I taste metal and insult. He sees it too. He turns his body, not big, just enough to put coat and shoulder between the lens and our small emergency. The bulb pops again and gets his jacket and not our faces. He does not perform it. He is a shape that says, try the next block. Go home, I call through the glass, not loud enough to feed a headline. 30 families are tired. The light hesitates, then tires, then leaves. Rain fills the space it vacates like a better decision. He steps back into the circle of the stairwell, small, wet, useful. I can call a generator, he starts. Lighthouse, I say, soft. He stops. He hears it the way a dog hears its name in a crowded park. He nods once and lets the grand gesture sit back down in its chair. Then, almost smiling at himself, he pulls 3 battery lanterns from his bag like a magician who prefers practical illusions. He leaves one on each landing. Not a photo. A glow. We check on 2B. A sleepy man opens, hair wild, eyes blank with soup. His wife is in the shower with the radio singing Hope too loud. The ceiling above them holds. The panel downstairs hums a lie that thinks it is helpful. We move on. In the hall outside my door, the air smells like wet plaster and cheap pine cleaner. He sets a lantern on the floor, and the light makes the scuffed baseboards look honest. I want to cry from the sight of it and do not. I open the door to my apartment, and the plant on the sill looks like the only person in the room who slept. Water beads where the window forgot how to close all the way. The pot under the slow leak keeps its small promise. I have blankets, I say, and crackers we pretend are dinner when the stove acts shy. He laughs, and it lands like a clean spoon on a clean plate. He shakes rain from his coat and stays by the door like a helpful stranger who knows how not to take over. I hand Mrs. Ortiz a dry sweater from my chair, and she says no twice before yes like a decent person. She peels off her wet cardigan and shivers into mine. Her eyes shine when the warmth arrives. She touches my cheek like I am a good daughter in a story she would tell if she were in the mood. You two keep fixing things, she says, and ambles back to her floor with the pride of a captain returning to a calmer deck. The room is small and full of the storm. He looks at the lighthouse ticket under the magnet and does not reach. He looks at the napkin square on my table and does not ask. He looks at the plant and says a single reasonable word. Alive. Barely, I answer. We sit on the rug with our backs against the couch, feet toward the lantern, crackers between us, 2 mugs of tap water pretending to be tea. The sound of the rain softens by a thread. Somewhere a siren goes by at a decent pace. The building creaks like it is remembering the language of weather. I wanted to fix all of it with one call, he says into the small light. I nearly forgot the rule. Thank you for remembering, I say. Tonight needed hands, not headlines. He nods. He turns the ring once and then stops, catching the habit before it shows off. He keeps his hands where we can see them, palms up, empty, warm. You are very good at telling a room what it is for, he says. You are getting good at listening, I answer, even when your coat is expensive. We smile like a truce that does not need a treaty. My phone buzzes on the table. The landlord, finally. A message with mumbled apologies and promises he has already broken twice. I breathe and let the anger go the way a wave goes back where it came from. I have a plumber's number, I tell him. A real one. From Mrs. Ortiz. He answers. He brings tools that smell like metal and a van with paint falling off. He will want cash. Text it to me, he says. I will pay the bill from across the street in a name that belongs to no story. Not for you. For the building. Fewer buckets makes better sleep. I hesitate because pride is a habit, then nod because dignity can share a table with help if you set the plates right. I send the number. He sends 2 words back. On it. We sit in the lantern glow and listen to water learn the new path we made for it. I tell him about the school form that still wants a father's line to be something you can write in ink. He tells me about a board member who thinks transparency means letting strangers look through your windows. He says no more than he needs to. I say no more than I want to. The room accepts both of us without asking for a receipt. When the plumber arrives, he smells like wet wool and competence. He nods at the valve and says someone was kind to it tonight. He fixes what the storm woke and makes the ceiling stop talking. He refuses coffee because his stomach is already a boat. He takes cash like a man receiving thanks from the right hands. He leaves with a towel he promises to return and a sentence that could belong to any decade. Call if it changes its mind. We walk him out. Rain has decided to become a drizzle. The power lifts its tired head and remembers its job. The stairwell lights blink and hold. The lantern glow looks almost silly in the brightness. He collects them and sets one on the last step as a gift for a hall that will need it again someday. On the sidewalk, a car idles with the heater on, working like a quiet heart. The photographer is gone. The street is a clean, wet slate. He looks at me and does not step into my space. Are you safe? He asks. I am, I say. I was before you came. I am more now. He nods, and the nod is not a signature. It is a shared weather report. Lighthouse works, he says. It does, I answer. It kept both of us from doing the wrong thing a little too loudly. He smiles, a real one that tilts the tired off his face. He looks once at the window, then at me, as if the beam were checking, as if he had learned to take instruction from something steadier than himself. Sunday, he says. Sunday, I say. He slips into the drizzle and disappears the way rain does when the city remembers how to be kind. I climb the stairs with the lantern against my hip. The building smells like pennies and lemon and a little victory. In my apartment, the plant sits brave on the sill. The pot under the old leak stands empty, smug. I write 3 lines on a scrap and tuck it under the magnet beside the lighthouse. Saw a man turn a valve with his bare hands. Learned that help can be smaller than pride and still make the room safer. Showed up for my neighbor with a sweater and a joke about brooms with lungs. I put the lantern in the closet and leave the door open a crack so the room can see it. The storm moves east and the night lies down. I sleep with the window cracked to hear the harbor breathe. A week after the storm, the city smells like wet coins and sun. The lantern I kept in the closet glows once when I test it and goes quiet, a small promise waiting for a night that needs it. The plant on the sill straightens its back like pride finally remembered it belongs here. The leak behaves. The pot retires to under the sink. His Sunday lines arrive the way a steady knock does when you are home enough to answer. Saw a kid tie a ribbon around a busted bike so it still looked like a gift. Learned that declining an interview leaves room to show up where no one is taking notes. Showed up at the tenant office to sit in the ugly chairs and wait with 3 people who hate forms. I let the words sit on the table and touch them with one finger like sea glass. They do not try to be magic. They are not nothing. At the diner, life continues with the good habits. The nurse folds a napkin into a sail for a toddler who refuses syrup. The fisherman promises to retire from arguing with gulls and fails before lunch. Mateo tucks a paper crane into the sugar bin like Hope wants coffee. The cook hangs a hand-lettered sign that says if you are mean to the staff, we turn your order into salad and people behave better than I expect. A white envelope finds me at the register. Thick paper, my name written like someone practiced. Inside, a card that smells like money and a clean request. The foundation invites you as a valued community voice to the waterfront pledge announcement. A corner note in small script. Your presence would mean a lot. No pressure. It is signed by a staffer with a last name that is trying to be friendly. I run my thumb along the cardstock and feel the weight of rooms I do not want to stand in. I put the card back in the envelope and set both in the drawer that sticks. I text him one line. My story will not be a backdrop. The reply lands almost at once. Understood. I will ask them to take my no for theirs. That night he sits in the booth with rain dried into the seam of his coat. He does not speak first. He looks at the window like it might be listening and then looks at me. I said no for both of us, he says. They said the words partnership and community. I said the words consent and privacy. We will move it 2 blocks and 3 trees away. The diner gets to stay a diner. I nod. Ordinary relief loosens my jaw. I set down pie like gratitude. We make choices in inches, not miles. I add him to my phone as Valve, a word that makes no room tilt when it lights the screen. I tape my mother's sentence inside my locker where only Steam can read it. Love is sometimes a door you open for yourself. I keep the lighthouse napkin in my wallet, not for proof, for courage. I leave the letter in the drawer that sticks because some truths should not have to travel every day. Midweek, an intern from the foundation shows up at the counter with a smile that was taught too quickly. She orders coffee and tries to slide a phone across like a tip. She wants a picture of the corner booth, no faces, just something to show atmosphere. The ask tastes like sugar poured on a boundary. No, I say, gentle and square. This room keeps people's edges intact. She reddens because shame is a good teacher when it is quiet. She nods and pockets the phone. 20 minutes later my screen lights with 3 lines. Saw my intern practice leaving a room without a souvenir. Learned I hired someone I can improve if I keep them in the light. Showed up at her desk and said we do not turn people into settings. I do not reply. I wipe a clean spot until it squeaks and the squeak makes the room smile. Another small test arrives folded into kindness. He asks if he can leave an envelope for me, not a check, a memory. A page about my mother, 1 story only, a thing I can keep sealed until I want to read it. I say yes. He leaves a plain envelope under the napkin dispenser. No name. No crest. 1 line on the front in neat handwriting. For a day when the air is gentle. I do not open it. I tuck it next to the letter in the drawer and trust myself to choose the hour. On Thursday, Mrs. Ortiz knocks with a ripe avocado and a rumor. The waterfront announcement is moving closer to the diner again because the press likes neon in the background. I breathe through my nose and text a single word. Lighthouse. He responds without punctuation. I am on it. By morning, the press trucks have been directed to the other side of the block. I watch one driver frown at a map and then shrug and obey. The diner keeps its soft hum. The coffee smells like agreement. The sign outside says open in a font that looks like it never learned to lie. In the quiet hour between lunch and the next wave, I take my mother's letter to the harbor. I sit on the lamppost bench with a chip of white paint and I read the lines I know by heart and the ones that still brand new. I fold it back into itself and do something I have not let myself do in years. I write to her. 3 lines. Saw the man who draws lighthouses lean into weather without a speech. Learned I can say no without turning to stone. Showed up for myself and kept the room mine. I slip the note into the envelope like a hand into a sleeve. I press my palm to the wood and feel the bench hold me like it always does. He asks once if I want him to go with me when I visit the small stone with my mother's initials. I say not yet. He nods like a true answer is worth more than the right one. He does not ask again. He writes a line on Sunday that is not about her and still is. Saw a woman leave flowers without posting it. Learned again that grief minds its business when we do. Showed up to carry boxes for a pantry that does not need my name. A reporter tries the door again. He gets a decaf and a soft lecture about privacy from the cook, who is surprisingly good at lectures when the subject is respect. The reporter tips large and leaves. I pin a sticky note to the office corkboard that says no cameras without consent and draw a wonky lighthouse in the corner so people know I am serious and kind. Toward the end of the week, my landlord's accountant calls in a voice that sounds whiter than paper. He offers to lower the rent if the foundation will list our building among community partners on their site. I laugh in a way that makes the laugh taste like salt. I tell him that is not how rent works or how dignity works. I tell him I have a plumber now with a van whose paint is falling off and that is enough. I hang up and text Valve a weather report. People keep forgetting that help is not a brand. His answer is a single line. People keep learning. He adds his 3 on Sunday. Saw a board member bring coffee with his own hands and no camera. Learned he can be better when asked in the right tone. Showed up at the clinic with chairs when the waiting room ran out of kindness. The waterfront announcement finally happens 2 blocks down and 3 trees over, behind a line of cones that looks like someone tried to teach order to a wind. He speaks for 6 minutes with a voice that has stopped pretending it can fix everything. He does not say my name or the diners. He says the words flood plan and bus route and shade. I watch from the kitchen doorway with steam on my face and think maybe this is what learning looks like when you have been trained to perform. When it is done, he texts a sentence that fits in a palm. Dawn tomorrow. Coffee before the trucks. No press. I will use the side door. I read it twice and hear my mother's hum under the words. I think about what stays and what does not. The booth. The bench. The napkin. The letter. The lantern in the closet. The safe word that knows when to sit up. The 3 lines on Sundays that keep both of us from reaching for speeches when steadiness would do. I write 1 line back. Dawn. We keep it small. Night comes in like a tide that knows my name. I set 2 mugs by the register and fold a napkin into thirds, then a square, corners neat as a new rule. I stand in the quiet and feel the diner breathe. The neon hum settles. The clock over the pass nods toward morning. There is 1 more door to open. I can feel the knob under my palm. The room is ready. The day has not yet decided its weather. Dawn slips into the diner like a friend with soft shoes. The neon goes quiet. The coffee machine finds its first song. I unlock the side door and the air outside smells like rain rinsed the city and left it kinder. I set 2 mugs on the counter and fold a napkin into thirds, then a square. The room holds its breath in the good way. He steps in with the hush of early hour, coat clean, hair pushed back by the kind of wind that wakes you up. No entourage. No watch that wants to be noticed. He nods to the room like it is a person we both respect. Morning, he says. Morning, I answer, pouring black. The steam rises and makes a little curtain between us before it disappears. We do not rush. He sits in the corner booth that has learned our names. I slide in across from him with my apron still tied and my palms around the cup. Outside, gulls practice their sentences and the harbor shows its first thin lines of light. I moved the trucks, he says, almost smiling. Far side of the block. No lenses in this window. No neon in anyone's story but yours. Thank you, I say. It lands like a plate finding its shelf. He sets a folded paper on the table, not a letterhead, not a card. A photocopied page with 4 sentences and a signature you could miss. Privacy and consent policy for public events. Community rooms are not sets. Names used only with permission. If harm is caused, repair is done in the same volume as the mistake. He taps the last line. Written. Posted, he says. Not perfect. But on paper where it can live a life that does not depend on who is in the room. Good, I say. Policies keep memory honest. He laughs once, quiet. He looks at the window, then back at me, the old lighthouse test happening without either of us needing to say the word. He reaches for his cup and I notice what I always notice. The pale thread of a scar across his knuckle. The small nick in the ring where metal remembers it gave. He drinks and sets the mug down with care, like he knows cups have their own history. I have been recognized my whole life, he says, words slow, unvarnished. I think I am only now learning how to recognize back. Not faces. Persons. The kind of work that keeps a room true. I do not look away. Then here is a thing to see. I tell him, and I let the sentence build itself. I am not a chapter in your redemption. I am the person at this table who knows how much creamer the nurse uses and which spoon makes the fisherman tell longer stories and how to talk a cook down from a bad day. I am the lighthouse drawn on a napkin, and I am the hand that folds it neat when it is time to work. He nods, and the nod is not a performance. I see it, he says. I see you. We let the quiet do its job. The clock over the pass ticks toward opening. I hear Mateo humming in the dish pit, a low line that makes the room braver. The cook unlocks the back and clatters pans like a promise. He looks over, takes in the booth, and lifts his chin in a small salute. Everybody knows what morning is for. I brought you nothing, he says, opening his hands to show their emptiness. Only a small question. When the day is over, and if the sky behaves, would you walk with me to the bench? No speech, just the water. If you choose no, I will take it like weather. Yes, I say. We keep it small. I pour a second cup and we sit there with the simple weight of warm in our hands. There is no big story happening in that moment. There is the feel of formica under my palm and the shape of a day deciding to be kind. He looks rested in a way that does not come from sleep. I feel taller without standing. The bell over the front door rings once, shy, and the first regular steps in. The nurse smiles like breakfast is a decision she is proud of. The fisherman pretends he did not come early to beat the gulls. I slide out of the booth and the room remembers its rhythm. Orders, refills, a joke that will travel through the kitchen twice before it lands at the pass. He stays for one coffee and a corner of toast. He leaves cash under the check and a note that uses only small words. Thank you for steady. See you at dusk. He touches the bell on his way out, 2 fingers, a quiet ritual. He chooses the side street. The day takes him back without a fuss. By noon the city has put on its shine. The trucks do their serious ballet 2 blocks away. I keep my head down and my name in my own mouth. Between tables, I open the drawer that sticks and take out the plain envelope he left last week. For a day when the air is gentle. It feels like today. I face the sink, steam on my cheeks, and slide the paper free. 1 page. No grand words. A single story I did not know. My mother once corrected a speech of his in pencil and he kept the page because her margin notes made the ideas more honest. He thanks her on the paper the way you thank a person who taught you how to be useful. I put it back. I press my palm to the counter to steady myself. I think of her counting wakes when she could not sleep. I think of myself counting plates and finding I am not lost. Evening finds the harbor sweeter than morning. We sit on the bench with the white chip near the bolt and watch the light loosen its hold. He does not reach for my hand. He keeps his palms open on his knees like someone who knows some gifts arrive without being taken. I will not say the big word, he says, eyes on the water. Not until you ask me to test it. If that day never comes, I will keep showing up where small is the right size. Good, I say. We will keep the gate low and the hinges oiled. A boy rides past on a too small bike with a ribbon tied to the crooked handlebar. The ribbon catches a piece of last light and waves at us like a tiny flag that refuses to care about pedigree. A gull complains. A fairy sighs. The bench remembers our wait. We sit until the first street lamp decides the dark could use help. I think about the rule we wrote without ever using a pen. I think about how kindness and boundary can share a table if both learn their manners. I think about my mother's line, that love is sometimes a door you open for yourself, and I feel it land in a new room inside me where there is enough space to keep it. When we stand, the path looks simple. He takes the side street. I turn toward my building that now smells like lemon and new pipe. We do not promise anything with too many syllables. We do not steal tomorrow from itself. At home, I set the lantern back on the shelf where I can see it. I fold the napkin into thirds, then a square, and slide it into my wallet like a quiet compass. I put the policy copy on the corkboard under a magnet shaped like a pear. I write 3 lines on a sticky note and let them keep me company. Saw morning ask for smaller voices and we gave them. Learned recognition goes both directions or it is just a bright mirror. Showed up where light needed holding and kept it steady. The kettle hums. The window catches a last smudge of gold. The city breathes like it has decided to try again. I stand in the soft of my kitchen and feel the day settle without settling for less. Hope is not loud. It is a practice. It is a mug on a table, a rule on a wall, a word you can say when the water rises. It is the choice to keep the light still and warm so whoever needs it can find the way.